Hey, it's Steve Orlando. I am back on this conversation series that we've been calling Who's Got the Juice, talking to folks I know from my current life as a comic book creator to support my former life as a wine and spirits specialist, especially with PM Spirits, the folks I still work with that I've known for a long time. Upstart company began by Captain Cognac, Nick Palazzi. Sort of a different type of company, folks that are focusing only on spirits, doing things a little differently, not necessarily pushing out well-known types of bottles, but pushing out bottles that are really dedicated to craft and doing their own thing. Sort of an underdog story that is the reason we're talking today to my friend Dan Didio. Part of this series is about not just examining what's in the bottle, but examining how spirits function in our lives, not just to sort of kick back and party with our friends, but there's something greater. There's a social aspect. There's a significance to opening that bottle and sharing it with friends. So that's what we're doing in this series. I'm talking to folks largely outside of the spirits industry about their experiences with that, both in their own industry and as it relates to the spirits in the bottle. So I'll toss it over to Dan. You might know him from such things as if you're my age, one of the co-creators of the show Reboot, way back for Mainframe Entertainment. Since then, after leaving TV, has held almost every role at DC Comics: editor, senior editor, executive editor, co-publisher, publisher, and now moving on into new things that we're going to talk about today. So Dan, hello. What's going on?
Hey, nothing much, Steve. How are you? Yeah, nothing much at all. It's a beautiful day today, but I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it is good to see you. It has been a minute, and I'm glad you could take the time. So, a lot of people know my story. You like to tell my story.
I love your story. It's a great story. I love telling stories. That's what we're good at. That's what we enjoy doing.
Yeah. So, for people who are seeing this, if this is your first interview, comics and myself breaking into the industry a long time coming. Started going to conventions when I was 12 to network, and all the time working other jobs. Back then, of course, lifeguarding. When I was in college, doing that, and then after school, having an English degree, I immediately needed a real job. And that is how I got into the spirits game, which eventually led me to working with PM Spirits as one of their reps, selling these craft spirits right up until about 2017 when I had to go full-time in comics. For me, during that time when I was networking, it was a boon to know about spirits because no matter where we were, and you'll talk about it, that scene, especially at huge shows like Comic-Con International, when you're trying to get noticed, you need that inroad. You need that conversation starter, that foothold. And for me, the fact that I could talk about wine and spirits, especially spirits later in my career, that was my conversation starter. So for me in my life, it was not just something I would use to relax in my own life, but it was also a way for me to move ahead in a side industry that I was hoping would become my full-time career eventually. So tell me a little bit about your own journey, both as it relates to how your evolving view of spirits and just sort of what you've done in general for folks that don't know.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I broke in, started working coming out of college. Actually, while I was still in college, I was working at CBS as a page, which is an entry-level position in the television business. I worked a lot of the television series, doing the audience seating, things of that nature. And it was an area that I was really fascinated by. I love the whole television business and everything it stood for. And I got more and more involved in it as I went along. I started as a page, wound up becoming full-time in that job, then ultimately working somewhat in production. I worked on things like the Thanksgiving Day Parade, the New Year's Eve show. Worked on a couple of local shows, worked some studio events and things of that nature at the CBS time. Then I moved over to ABC and I worked in station relations. I worked in public relations for the soap operas, All My Children, One Life to Live and Loving, a really fun period of time in my life. Then I moved over to children's television. I was a director of children's programming for ABC for a number of years. Then after that, I moved into mainframe because animation was my big love. I went over to animation first as a story editor, then ultimately became their senior vice president of creative affairs, just really helping start new shows, new ideas, putting some of the business deals together. And then that wound up, strangely enough, I was on the West Coast and then being bi-coastal for a period of time. Then ultimately I moved back to the East Coast with DC Comics, starting in there, which you'll find throughout my history, comics was always my big love. You talk about being 12 years old and loving comics. I can give you rejection letters dated back to 1976 and 1978 for when I first submitted ideas to comic companies. And the interesting thing I was able to do is really find a way to work comics into all my jobs. And I found a comic connection with the people I worked with and the shorthand of comic storytelling that helped me really progress in television. But since we talk about spirits, interesting thing about it is, I said in those days also, networking, getting involved, getting a chance to meet people in mixers were very big as a way to really learn about areas and the things that you can do. It's the way I learned about the company, by meeting different people at different social events. And it became a nice place to actually help really formulate opinions about what I thought would be good for my career and move forward, as well as meet different people that I can really help and get information from and access on times when I ever had any questions about particular paths that I wanted to walk down. I remember there's I knew that I didn't, let's put it this way, I knew I didn't want to work in news because I used to work some of the events for guests with 60 Minutes, and we used to have drinks with Morley Safer, and I forgot who the other guy was, but there's a couple of the 60 Minutes guys that used to, before the shows, they used to have a couple of drinks, and they used to invite us younger kids to come and sit with them and talk with them. And it was a way for us to be social, but also to learn about it, and everybody in a very relaxed environment. And it was interesting too, because also spirits played a big part in my days at Mainframe, mainly because it was such a high pressure job and environment that, we were so focused on the job of the day that we really couldn't plan ahead. And the only way we could do it is when we used to go out in a much more relaxed social environment, have a couple of drinks, and then during that time, be able to formulate game plans and things of that nature. We used to joke that the entire third season of Reboot was in a steak bar, and it was figured out on a tablecloth over 3 bottles of wines, 2 steaks, and 2 cigars, and
Like comics.
over like 3-4 hours, and I remember that very clearly. And those are good memories of times of this, because it really was just about a relaxation that came along with the conversation. And as you always say, it's when you hear the expression "good food and good drink," adds to a relaxing environment and something that's much more conducive to a more open and honest conversation, and more importantly, creativity.
I mean, I completely agree. It's we both know it's a common adage that all the deals at Comic-Con are made in the bar. And the funny thing is, I don't know if that's ever necessarily been true for me, but I do think a lot have been made over dinners. They've been made in those times when you can get away from the show and sort of take a breath. Whether it's right on the seaport or something like that. I think I've found that to be true. Anytime when you can carve out a moment to sort of get away from the hustle of whatever the job is. And I think that, you mentioned cigars. I think like having a drink, that social wedge that you get, that's sort of your off ramp for whatever the stress of work is. And I think that has always been true in comics. The interesting thing that I want to ask you, you've talked about working in Canada, you've talked about working in New York, you talked about obviously working in comics and television. Have you seen the culture change? Have you seen the culture, or at minimum, differentiate between these other industries? Because the thing interesting for me, especially to answer in regards to Canada, when I started selling craft spirits mostly from Europe, and even when I was working in wine before, the sort of mindset was interesting to me. A lot of American wines tend to be very high alcohol, and there's this sort of mindset, of course, of throwing back a bottle of wine and getting quite relaxed, to say the least, versus European style. It's different. It's you want lower alcohol. You want to have things that you can drink and socialize for long periods of time without sort of getting blotto and sort of checking out of the interesting social aspects. So with that in mind, that's a change that I found when I got into this industry. do you see the cultures differing? Do you see them evolving, you know, in your time across these industries?
It's interesting. What I've always found the difference between the U.S. and Canada, in particular, was the Canadians were much more on the cutting edge of what was happening globally, and then much more in tune of things that are happening in other countries, and more willing to sample and try things in other countries. It's almost like it becomes a testing ground. I see in Canada that a lot of folks are really mixing and trying different things, and then ultimately, whatever seems to really take hold, it starts to hit to the U.S. in a much bigger way and much more cohesive in what it's trying to accomplish. I see a lot more experimentation happening in the Canadian market than I did in the U.S. market. That's one of the things. It was funny because the principal owners of Mainframe actually also were invested in a wine distribution company along the Pacific Northwest. So I used to, as a gift at the end of each year, get a box of wines from all around the world. And it allowed me to really start to sample and try different types of wines that I probably would not have been as exposed to, because wherever I might go in the US might have a very limited selection based upon whatever the interest of that area is, more so than trying to bring in a more diversified audience on that, you know?
Yeah.
So I see the difference there. In Europe, particularly in the UK, you talked about doing business at the bar. Might be a conversation in the US, but in England, especially in the UK, business was done at the bar. Simple as that. You know, there used to be a convention, a Bristol convention,
Mm-hmm.
which is to this day it's a legend of lore. It's one of these conventions that's gone away. But literally, you would go to the show, and nobody would be at the show because everybody would be at the bar. Every one of the talents would be at the bar. And I'm not kidding you. I mean, literally at the bar, went from when it opens to when it closes, and you did all your business at the bar. You did all your talking, all your things. You made all your deals. Everything was done at the bar, not on the convention floor. And I remember one time they moved locations for the show, and the hotel wasn't prepared for the convention, and it was the first time I've ever gone to a bar that ran out of liquor. Two times. First time that was the first time I was ever at a bar that ran out of liquor, and literally every drop was gone. They literally didn't have anything to sell, and it was done early afternoon because they were not prepared for everybody coming in. So it was pretty amazing to see. But it's culturally, it was a conversation. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a real business conversation unless you had a pint in your hand, literally, because that's how everybody conversed. It was part of the basically the tools of the trade, so to speak, and it was fascinating. Those, like you said, it's funny. You said people aren't drinking to get drunk; they're drinking to drink. There's literally, you have a drink in your hand, and it's never empty. It's never full. It's always in the process of being drunk.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a difference in culture, and I think it's one that's interesting. I, you know, I think that in my experience, just being in our industry, that we share comics just for even 6 years, I've also seen sort of an awareness raise, as wine and spirits, especially different types of
Yeah.
spirits in America, become more mainstream. Again, like I said, in 2014 or 2015, when I was just breaking in and I would say, oh, I do this, most people had no idea what I was talking about. Now, I really feel like a lot of people are meeting us on the level of awareness that this is surprising to me.
Yeah.
I think that I sort of mentioned this. I was speaking with a voice actress in this series before, and what I think is funny is I think esoteric culture or niche culture, more and more, it's almost, the concept of it is disappearing. Like it used to be, oh, you're a wine and spirits nerd, or you're a comics nerd. But now, so much has gone mainstream. I am selling things and talking about things in my old job that my friends from home in Syracuse back in the day would never know about, and now they're getting craft distilleries and things again in upstate New York.
Right.
And likewise, the people that were throwing me in lockers in high school, I go back to my 10-year reunion and they're losing their mind asking me if I know about Deathstroke, because they've seen him on whatever TV show, you know, and so what do you think, you know, you've seen it happen in a couple industries when this stuff goes mainstream, like what is the beachhead for that? How does that happen? I think it's a good thing. But you know, comics existed in our shared industry. Comics existed since, what do you want to say,
Yeah.
1938, and it's only happened now. So, or relatively, it's only happened now within the past 15 years. So how does this stuff go mainstream? It's exciting for me, but A, like how do we get there? B, how do we capitalize on this energy?
I mean, in some ways, if you talk about spirits, some of it becomes about status in a weird way. Um, you know, people order a special bottle or a special shot or a special something to identify status or importance. And people become judged about what drink they're buying for somebody or what drink they're drinking, because ultimately it becomes indicative of their personality. And in some ways, it helps identify who they are. The more unique a drink becomes, the more high end or the harder it is to reach, the more special somebody feels because they have access to something other people don't. Um, as a matter of fact, it's used to be the same conversation around music. You know, it's almost the way music is that, you know, the more mainstream something becomes, the more people push the more eclectic corners because they want to show how they have a unique voice or an individuality that identifies themselves. So a lot of these things, the craft drinks and the craft making of wine, beer, spirits is important because ultimately it's a way somebody helps define themselves by the uniqueness of the material that they basically put in their life. And then it's about them sharing their uniqueness. This is something so important to me, and you're important to me, therefore I am going to share it with you. And that becomes a unique bond between the two of them that I think shows a connection or a valuation or a trust that starts to depend, and it becomes the basis for a working relationship as well.
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that in a way, it's, you know, what popped in my head when you said that is because you need to keep looking for more sort of like, I don't want to say esoteric, but you need to keep pushing the boundaries to speak about yourself, if that's true. It feels as though in that case, you know, for companies, whether they're publishing companies, whatever, if you're offering content of some format, when something goes mainstream, there's that initial push of excitement, of awareness, but then it's also a window to sort of use that openness to get more and more different things on the market, you know, like
Right.
I never could have, you know, what we're going to drink today. I don't think necessarily 10 years ago or 20 years ago, even more so, we could have been gotten over the plate because there wouldn't be the context. There wouldn't be the sort of group awareness, wouldn't have been at a certain level where you could then offer it something at a level above it. So it feels like what, you know, when these things go out into the world, into the greater mindset, I mean, it's obviously a financial opportunity, but it's also an opportunity then to raise the bar of what is interesting if something has become sort of ubiquitous.
Right.
You know, again, like I look at this like on our side of the job. When I was a kid, I was excited there was a Batman movie. Now my friends are asking me about the Doom Patrol.
Right.
You know, so the challenge then becomes, what do we offer? And this is something I know we went through together. You know, if you can get some sort of concept, for us it was these superhero content. If you can get Supergirl and Wonder Woman on TV and animation and any of them, you know, video games, how do we, the originators, offer something then that is unique and different and must have? You know, what do you think about meeting that challenge? Whether it's, you know,
I mean, you know, take the comic book analogy and apply it to everything you're talking about. The reality is, as soon as something becomes mainstream, the goal, you realize it's going to have a shelf life. You know, if it has a surge in popularity, if it becomes big and everybody rallies around it, sooner or later that's going to wane. So, and everything has a different shelf life. You know, some things last longer. Talking comics, X-Men lasted a hell of a lot longer than certain other series, you know, that were out there at the time. Have a longer shelf life because they found a way to reinvent themselves and keep them interesting moving forward. With the same thing with drinks, something like that. If I'm always constantly hearing about a new spirit or liquor or wine that seems to be breaking through the market, and everybody gravitates towards it and they enjoy it, but they don't stay with it. They go to look for the next new exciting thing. So the question is, you always got to find ways to keep yourself evolving, but not being so radically different from what's being interesting, because you don't want to be so far askew that nobody's going to come your way, but you want to find a way to build on the interests that are out there and expand on them. So that's why you're always constantly in writing and comics, you're always constantly going back in and trying to figure out new ways to approach a character and new angles to go, because if they've seen it all before, you don't want that the familiarity works against you in some cases if you want to bring people back on a regular basis. Because they get tired of it, it gets tedious. And so we always have to keep on challenging our readers, and in some cases you got to keep on challenging people so that they can find things that are interesting and exciting to do. You always want that comfort food, I always say. There's things you want like that, but you do need the other things to help balance out the full meal.
So what you're saying, we're going to taste in a second, and I think it actually is a nice segue because you have to focus on the positives that you can offer that another medium can't offer. So what am I talking about? In comics, it's, we're limited only by what can be put on the page. We don't have a different budget if it's someone sitting in a chair for 20 pages or if they're traveling the multiverse for 20 pages. The budget is the budget, and that's something that you can't offer in TV. I mean, we talked about this when I was on Supergirl. We got to be bigger and more exciting than the show because otherwise people are just going to watch the show. How does this relate to what we're talking about today? Well, an up-and-coming company can't really offer things that these massive producers can. I don't think you can offer the regularity, like you can't offer something where you have an endless supply of bottles and every single one is going to taste the same. So you take that and you start doing bottlings like we have here, where each release is a moment. It's a unique blend, and when they're gone, they're gone. And for some folks, that can be seen as, oh well, I love this, and oh, but I can't get any more in 5 years. But you turn that into a positive. You say, well, this is, you're essentially getting a snapshot in time. It's a phrase I've used before on this interview series. And I think that it's actually one of the boons of small craft production versus larger production. To tie it around to everything else you've said before we taste, if spirits are about sharing this moment with someone, something that's important to you, and someone else who is important in your life, well, if you're having a mainstream bottle, I'm not going to throw shade at some company or another. But if you're having a large production bottle, how special is that moment? Versus something where if you have an individually numbered bottle, like we're doing, like this is 1960 bottles. That's a true moment. You're sharing it with someone, it might never come back.
And I think that's always interesting. And especially if you take what you're saying and apply it to the comic book sensibilities. You work at a company that produces Superman, and people create characters and stories that operate just like a Superman story. There'll always be a watered down version of Superman. So if you're going to want that type of story, you're always going to gravitate to Superman, the primary character. Why get a knockoff when I can have the real deal? So therefore, if you're going to do something similar, it has to have its own uniqueness of value that sets it apart and makes it a reason why you want to go to that particular product, more so than the main one that everybody goes to. So if you're looking at mass production, there's people doing the mass production, but if you're looking to stand out of the crowd, then you have to find your own voice and your own style in order to make that work, especially in comics, and I think probably in spirits as well.
I would totally agree. So we're going to pour, as we pour and taste this though, because we talked about this a little bit in the pre-interview, what's your own journey been as to what you like? We talked about what is in this bottle. You were surprised that, it tasted like it did, and we're going to taste it again. But how do we get there? What were you into? You've been in a lot of different phases, a lot of different industries. What did you see people drinking? Because I'm sure what was going on in the 70s is not what's going on now. And how did, where are you at now? Where did you start? I'll be honest. I was in, I'll eat this one first. Like, I'm in college, drinking the Handle the Doers I inherited from my grandmother when she died in 1995, that presumably is still good in 2005, and some supposedly lime green vodka that was mutagenic colored and bright green. And now we're drinking a limited run bottle of Armagnac. So it's been a journey for me, but I'm broadening my palate. But how has that happened to you as well?
Well, it's funny, as a kid, fortunately, I could go back to not drinking, but I could watch people drinking back in the 60s. And it was all about martinis, Manhattans, and old fashions. And I wouldn't know what any of those things were at the time as a kid, but I knew that they meant something, and it meant that you're older and much more sophisticated. As a teenager, when you're first getting into bars and first getting out a bit, you know, in the late '70s, it was a big Jack Daniels crowd in those days. You know, if you weren't drinking what's under the bar, you were drinking what's behind the bar, and behind the bar was Jack Daniels, or the infamous Goldschlager, which I still don't understand why anybody would even want to drink that.
I mean, I've had some Goldschlager in my time. Uh,
you know,
you
and
know,
as I say, the Goldschlager is the fireball for the '70s. You know, and but for me later on, it did start to get a little more discerning. You know, I was never much of a whiskey drinker as I was a tequila, so I'm more of a tequila person. Tequila and vodka are probably my two that I enjoy the most. Um, and therefore, when I try a whiskey or I try something else, I, I'm always sampling it from a place to see if there's, I hate to say it this way, a reason to like it. you
hey,
know,
no, I mean,
you know what I mean? And it's always like that.
you gotta say it.
Yeah, and it's funny because I always go back. You know, I always wind up back in my tequila bottle, so to speak. But I'm always trying different ones because again, and just the same way, I have inside the house probably have a lineup of about 12 different whiskeys and scotches that these people have brought over the days that I find interesting to try and taste, and I'm always intrigued by it. And it's not that I don't enjoy it; it's just I enjoy others more. So that's why I'm always looking to find a whiskey that I can really really sit back and relax. I like a sipping drink, something that comes down smooth, a nice easy flow, nice easy flavor, not much of a kick afterwards. That seems to be the way I'm able to really pace myself and relax and enjoy myself with a drink and with company. You know.
Sure. Well, and as I sent you, you know, for people who are sort of getting it from context, I we're tasting the Cantata, the XO Armagnac today. It is a limited run, 1,960 bottles, a blend of 5 different casks, ranging from 84 to 97. There's an 85 in there. That's my vintage.
Mm-hmm.
So Armagnac I've always found fascinating, and we can pour it and drink it as we talk about this. But you know, PM traditionally does European spirits. They've branched out since I started working for them. But when I was selling, I always found Armagnac to be a nice crossover spirit for people who do like American whiskey, for example. And now we do have a bourbon with Mike Drop, a limited.
Hey, you see how we're different? You got a whiskey glass, I got a shot glass.
Well, you know, there's a lot to be said about our character from these two selections, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you know, I always found a lot of success with Armagnac for the reasons you said. It is produced from grapes. It is produced in France, but it's finished differently than cognac, usually with newer oak. So you get more of the vanilla, more of the spice, a lot of the characteristics that people enjoy out of a traditional American bourbon. At the same time, being made from grapes, it's often a little bit softer. So it's why I sent it to you, and it's why I think I had a lot of interest from whiskey buyers back when I was selling.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I actually sat down with a couple of good whiskey drinkers and tried this, and we were all trying to figure out, and it was nobody can pin it down. They realized that it had a lot of that flavor that you said it had from the whiskey, but they knew that there was something else going on that basically took a lot of the harsher edge off of it at the end and made it much smoother. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed it, because I felt it had that much smoother feel to it towards the end, which I react more comfortably to, because I don't want to be fighting an aftertaste while I'm going for another sip or something like that. I want to make sure that I'm enjoying the flavor all the way through as we continue to go on, you know?
No, absolutely. And I think that it is, you know, the other thing I would say about this, and you did try it in the shooter, I'm not going to crucify you for that.
That's okay. I grabbed what I could come outside. I realized I had my whiskey glass inside. I was not prepared.
But on the topic of, you know, cultural differences as well, when you're doing stuff that's cask strength, and this is overproof, it's about 45% alcohol. And the other thing that you've seen with scotches as well is that you can drink it straight, but it's also sort of made to be had on usually a large format ice cube, and you can watch sort of how the flavors change. And that's something else that I learned about that I'm excited about when it comes to craft bottled spirits, overproof spirits. You know, stuff that goes for regularity, you often find it's not as dynamic. You
Yeah,
know, like a bottle that's artificially proofed down to 80 proof, 40% alcohol. Yeah, if you have that on the rocks, well, then it's going to fall apart because it's not
yeah,
made to evolve.
yeah,
It's
agreed.
made to be where it is. And I think that there is a little more authenticity. Essentially, I feel like the less you do, the less that happens in between the barrel and the bottle. There's more of a moment there, and that's exciting for me. I never set out in these conversations with a specific thing I want to talk about. I had an idea where we might go. This isn't exactly it, but I will say that the sort of like the log line of this seems to be what you said about sort of spirits culture being about sharing, essentially sharing with someone else you're close to, sharing a moment with someone else you're close to. And to me, when you're the uniqueness of a bottle like this, that only lends itself to that concept.
Right.
It lends authenticity, it lends gravitas to that concept because it is not something, that if they like, to be honest, maybe they can even get somewhere else. It's just that specific, time and place. And then through that bottle, you're basically time traveling, to the situation that led to the creation of that bottle. And that's what wine is like almost
Right.
always. But I think you can see that more and more with spirits these days. And that happens with agave too. We're talking about tequila.
Yeah.
There's incredible diversity when it comes to agave.
Yeah, and
But
and it's funny because it really is a learning curve. You talk about what it was like in the '70s and move on. Then, like I said, there's the liquor under the table. There's liquor behind the table, behind the bar, and those are your two choices, pretty much. And then once you start to break it down, then you start to understand what the different flavors are and what the different appeal of them are. But it's funny you said that. I was afraid to bring out a glass with ice. I didn't know if that was a good thing or not. So now I should have my glass of the ice waiting on the side because that's the way I prefer most of my drinks. I
no,
just
I mean, never be afraid. Never be
yeah,
afraid. So, because we've seen a lot of trends happen in all these industries, I'm interested to see, before we wrap up, you've tasted a thing like this. We've talked about sort of what my old friends are about at this company. We're in the game now, but both of us not actively.
yeah.
I'm a spirits fan. I'm now living as a writer. You're doing production stuff now. So from the outside, where do you see, looking at where this was even 10 years ago? Um, you've helped guide a lot of different companies into the future. What do you think is next for the spirits industry? Like, what's the next beachhead if this is where people are at now? If you and I are going out and people are knowing what things like this are, where are we going, in your opinion?
Oh, it is. Well, listen, we've seen it happen with beer, with the craft business, and now it's much more about what these guys are making. What are their own mixes coming out, and the uniqueness of all the different flavors of the beer they're bringing out into the location. And I think, quite honestly, a lot of what you're seeing from the spirits business and all this is really the bottles that are people using to identify themselves and trying to be part of their personality. And in some ways, when you talk about a social drink or a business drink, part of accepting someone's drink or their drink of choice is almost like a bond between yourself, or almost like a similar way of signing a contract in a weird way, is that the fact that you're sharing and engaging in something that's important to one of them, and you're accepting it and giving it that same level of importance, is a sign of respect in an interesting way. I saw, actually, you know what? We're talking about going around the world before, and it made me start thinking too. I saw that very big when I was in Korea. The sharing a drink was not just a social thing, but it was also a respect or a business or an opening file. Almost like an opening shot for a conversation on a business side. And it almost needed to be that we have to meet on this one level to win each other's respect at the start before we started to move forward from there. So I think there's a lot of that goes on. And I think as people start to identify more with different objects and different sensibilities and different flavors and tastes, that it becomes much more specific to them about what their interests are and what reflects them the most, what they enjoy the most. And in sharing what you enjoy most with others helps you be able to create a social circle or a business circle that you feel has a common interest in yours, and therefore you have a commonality and bond that you can build from. But in some ways, as we start to get more specific in our drinks, and it's not generic, but it is much more flavorful in sense, it also becomes something that becomes a badge of honor when you share it, and it becomes something much more personal to invite other people to be part of, you know?
So eventually you're saying when I'm ordering Madeira at like a college party, like someday I won't be made fun of for that.
I didn't say that one because you, first of all, I don't know what you're doing at a college party. Second of all, but
I'm just the coolest TA. That's what's going on.
but it's honestly for the more intimate social gatherings
Yeah.
than it is probably for that. Because unless it comes in a vat, I don't think the college kids you can keep up with them.
Well, you know, Dan, you can put anything in a King's Cup. Trust me.
No, that's more than fair. More than
We
fair.
try to. I try to avoid that now that I'm in my 30s. You know.
But I'm going to be honest with you. What I did here, when this bottle, when you sent me the bottle, the first thing I wanted to do was share it with my friends, because it was special to you, it became special to me, and because it became special to me, I wanted to share it with others and have other people partake in something that I felt was elevated with importance. So therefore, it was an important statement from me to be able to pour a drink from this for other people, because it made me share a moment in a way that, even though we meet on a regular basis, made it a slightly different meeting, because we mixed it up a little bit and we brought something new into the mix that we can all evaluate and talk about and discuss together. So from that, it was a lot of fun, and it was a great conversation for a while. Yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Well, all right. So to wrap up the official portion of this, it has been, as always, good talking to you. It's been good drinking this and talking about sharing this moment with you, like we're talking about, and sort of just wrapping our heads around where spirits culture's been, where it's going, where it could go. You know, that's can I make a journey into mystery joke here?
Yeah.
I've already done it. But thank you. Importantly, for people who are watching this, Dan, if you want to say anything else, where can people find you? What's coming next for you? Like, what do people need to know?
It's I'm being very judicious. I mean, it's very hard to get anything started um, on a normal day. To get something started in the middle of a pandemic while the world shut down, it becomes extraordinary. So what it allows you to do, it allows you for a lot of introspection, allows you to really evaluate what's important for you, what's not, where you really want to do, and allows you to make a lot of notes and things in preparation for things opening up. The interesting part was we all, probably myself and probably a lot of people, thought the world would be opened up by now, and it hasn't. So now it's about adjusting to what's going forward. And honestly, it's weird. I gave myself the artificial Labor Day, take a break till. So honestly, I'm coming up to the end of my week, where now I feel like I got to get it back into motion again, back into business again. I'm still built of the end of the summer on Labor Day, and then everything, school and work and all things starting up after that. I feel that I need to get started again. But I've got a couple of things in the work on the comic side and on the on the on the on the animation side, which is really what I'm really most interested in.
Sure.
I felt, I felt there was certain things I still wanted to accomplish in the world of animation that I didn't get a chance to do. So I think that's the biggest issue that needs scratching right now.
And you don't have to worry about fifth weeks anymore, which is great.
Yeah, no. It's just got to worry about whether these things get done. But it's a lot of fun. It's interesting to try to relearn a market after being out of it for almost 20 years, and how much has changed and how much is the same. Is always intriguing to me, and it's trying to take what's new and apply the craft from what you knew, what was old, and build something for today. I've met some good response. So I think hopefully within the next couple of months, something hits the ground in an appreciable way that gives me a sense of direction. But right now, I'm kind of enjoying life at the moment.
I don't have any doubt. I don't have any doubt. You've been since you let me in the door, you've been an ass kicker. So I'm not really.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, it's when you're running full speed for so long, your first inclination is continue to go, and then once you got a chance to stop, and in some ways, because of everything came to a stop, it forced me to stop as well, and I've taken full advantage of it and actually found it extraordinarily relaxing and a wonderful recharge. And I don't feel completely the need to be doing things, just doing anything, but more along the lines doing things that I truly want to do. And I think I mentioned to you, getting a chance to work and talk to people.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
You know, which is the fun part.
Well, listen, thank you as always for talking, for having you on. I appreciate it, you know, and everyone, you know, these conversations always sort of germinate in their own way, and it's really exciting for me. So thank you for being on. Me, Steve Orlando.
Thanks, sir, for the bottle. This will be empty before the end of the weekend now.
Before the end of the day, the way the pandemic is going. But you know, we appreciate your time, and it's a pleasure, and I'm excited for people to hear what you have to say as part of this series. So thank you again.
Great talking to you, Steve, and I wish you all the best, man. I hope to see you soon. That's for sure.